Tesla absolutely knocked the socks off of every single estimate. I mean, this is
So,
like across the board. This is
question
a
for
massive
you.
beat.
The big news here is gross margin, 19.8%. That was the bane of Wall Street's existence for the longest time.
Cybertruck hit positive gross margins.
Wow. Did somebody check in on the Tesla bears, see if they're okay?
Energy gross margins for the quarter, 30.5%.
Yikes.
Wow.
That is wild. That is a big shock.
The energy business alone should have a market cap of $1 trillion. They created more superchargers last quarter than the previous quarter. So they have not slowed down. In fact, they've accelerated.
So one of the things they note, the first thing I was looking at was whether regulatory credits came in pretty high, but they were in the $700 million range, which was higher than average, but not crazy high, lower than where it was last quarter. But it looks like there was a decent amount of recognition of FSD revenue related to Cybertruck and actually Smart Summon. So I'm trying to figure out exactly how much that is because they didn't exactly detail it. So I'm wondering if in the just difference in the balance sheet quarter over quarter, we might be able to hone in on that deferred revenue piece. So it was, I mean, it's actually pretty consistent. So I'm not sure what the rationale is here.
So Matt, you hit on something. Hey there, by the way, you hit on something.
Yeah, I just jumped right in right when they dropped it.
You mentioned they break out the Cybertruck FSD revenue and not anything else. That's
Well,
fascinating.
no, they didn't break out the Cybertruck FSD revenue. They said that there was recognition of FSD related to the Cybertruck. So all of the Founders Edition Cybertrucks came with FSD. There wasn't an option not to have it. I believe they delivered that functionality right at quarter end. So they were able to recognize FSD for a decent amount of those vehicles for those Cybertrucks. And then for across the fleet, at least in the United States, or actually Smart Summon.
Cool.
So trying to figure out exactly how much that was, but they don't say it right there in the summary.
Stock hit 227. I mean, the big news here is gross margin, 19.8%. That was the bane of Wall Street's existence for the longest time. And I was right. We never saw 5 earnings misses in a row. So that history didn't repeat, which is good. We got a beat there.
Yeah, Cybertruck hit positive gross margins.
Wow.
And it looks like
after 3 quarters.
In the outlook section, their product, they're reaffirming a more affordable model on start for production first half of 2025. So that's good. It seems, completely separate from the robotaxi product here.
Looks like Emmett's gonna do okay on his little
miniature bet.
call option.
I don't know. I mean, it's got to get past 235 to be in the money. But I could probably sell it at the open tomorrow for a nice 3x gain or something.
Yeah, it's screaming past 230 now. I think we could see 240, 250 tomorrow if this continues. But again, it depends on the guidance. And with these types of positive fundamental numbers, with all the investments that they're making, they can be much more confident in their guidance going forward, especially around Model 2.5 and all that stuff. So a lot of goodness here. Did somebody check in on the Tesla bears, see if they're okay? Tesla. Okay. What do you have highlighted there?
Yeah, I love this statement. These vehicles will utilize aspects of the next generation platform as well as aspects of our current platforms and will be able to be produced on the same manufacturing lines as our current vehicle lineup. And this is pretty much exactly in line, I think, with my expectations, but also just it makes common sense that if we're going to produce the Cybercab in large volumes, we'll say somewhere in the 5 to 10 million vehicles per year range. Well, you've got a long, even if we exit 2025 with 3 million units of capacity, growing that to then 3 million plus 5 million a year of Cybercabs, that's a huge jump. And so we definitely need whatever those next generation vehicles are to help expand the capacity of the supply chain and the manufacturing base. And whatever that vehicle is, it needs to be something that is halfway in between the Cybercab and current 3 and Y in order to help make that a continuous ramp that is something that can be accomplished feasibly.
So I've got some breaking news, if you guys don't mind me jumping in. Energy gross margins for the quarter, 30.5%.
Yikes.
Wow.
That is wild.
Wow.
That is a big shock.
Well, before you joined, Matt, I said, based on 2026 numbers that I forecast, the energy business alone should have a market cap of $1 trillion. That's how important this business is. And nobody's appraising it.
I'd be curious on how you kind of get to those numbers on a rule of like the high level you're looking at.
Yeah, just the growth rates. It also assumes the build out of a third mega factory after Shanghai and 12 gigawatt hours per facility and a constant 25% profit margin
Mhm.
and just crazy growth. I mean, energy is needed. They will not have any problem selling these things through 2030, in my opinion.
Yeah, so I agree. I mean, I think the TAM is very large. But every time I've done the math though and tried to kind of back in on this, I'm getting, like maybe $50 to $100 of
Share
value
price.
to share price implication. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
like I think it's important and underrated, but I would struggle to get to the $1 trillion mark, at least on a present value basis. If you're going to project out a number of years and say at a future value, it could get to $1 trillion, I'd buy that.
So are there any pages y'all want me to go double click on and dig into, or?
I did a search for the update on the 4680 cell, and there was just like one update in battery powertrain manufacturing. The last sentence is Q3. We produced our 100 millionth 4680 cell and continue to progress our dry cathode manufacturing lines. So I don't remember where they were previously, what their last like metric was for how many 4680 cells they produced, but at least they're quoting, maybe someone will do the math and see kind of what their rate of improvement is, I guess, on the 4680, because I know that's a big part of their future still, right?
Yeah, I remember they actually tweeted out about that 100 millionth cell, and I think Jordan had a good thread
Okay.
on what the implications of that were for growth, and basically that, yeah, we are finally getting into a new phase of exponential growth for the 4680 again. When you compare that, like you said, with the dry cathode thing being solved, then it looks like, maybe we're finally out of the woods of all the choppiness for 4680 growth. All right. So any other highlights we want to dig into?
Trying to read as I go.
Yeah, I mean, just one note on page 8, I think is pretty interesting. They're talking about their AI software and hardware, and at the end of that, they say they expect to have 50,000 H100s capacity at the Gigafactory Texas by the end of October. I wonder if that's actually usable capacity already. I wasn't thinking they'd have that much on like so quickly. So if that's true, that seems like that'd be good news for the development of FSD. But I'm a bit surprised they don't seem to say anything about like V13, which was expected to drop in the end of October. As far as I can tell, they haven't mentioned that in here.
I don't see any mention of that specifically. James had pointed out that Joe Tegmeyer this morning called out the fact that they've got the liquid cooling running for the Cortex cluster. And so I'm sure that's probably in preparation to get, that's looks like 21,000 H100s up and running above and beyond what they already have.
There's a picture of the cooling as well in the deck. You want to flash it for a second? Only 2 of the fans are running though, so 1/3. I think they're still testing it.
So there's 2 interesting things that I just saw. I don't know if you guys already talked about it or not, but it looks like they are anticipating a really big Q4 because they think there will be slight growth year over year.
Wow.
So
Yeah, Elon's going to pull out all the stops to make sure they do not shrink, even if it means 0% on all vehicles, FSD transfer, etc. I expect that to happen, and they have the capacity. And the numbers just out of Shanghai this morning were very strong, 3rd best week
yeah,
ever, and Model 3 is 1/3 of all volume.
yeah, under Outlook it says we expect to achieve slight growth in vehicle deliveries in 2024. So what does, you guys keep me honest, what's that mean? They have to hit 500,000?
And they've never hit 500 before, so I mean that's
Yeah.
that's a lot
And
of
then
vehicles.
and then for all those people talking about Tesla needs to do a capital raise, it sounds like they're signaling that
Who's
they
saying
don't need to
that?
do a
Who's
capital raise.
saying that? Whoever says that,
They've got
like 30 billion in cash.
33.6 billion in cash, and
That's the most
I was just
ridiculous
looking
thing.
at this. Free cash flow in Q3 was 2.7 billion. I mean, that's wild.
I'm
Do we
not
have
going to throw anybody under the bus, but they're on the other big stream happening right now, and they's not one person; it's several people.
I actually haven't heard that in a while. I mean, that's kind of shocking to me that people are still saying Tesla needs to raise cash. I mean, I thought we dispensed with that like 5 years ago.
That's ridiculous.
I know you guys probably like it's ridiculous.
have we dug into why the revenue was a miss? Was that because
Yeah.
of revenue recognition around megapacks?
No, I mean, I think the Megapack revenues were largely in line. The energy revenues, at least with what I had been modeling, I'm not comparing it to where the street came in, but I mean,
So
I think the automotive
Mm.
sales numbers are lower than I would have expected. So 18.8 billion versus 18.5 billion in Q2, and that's despite having delivered a lot more vehicles. I'm guessing product mix. I mean, we know they sold a lot more in China at a much lower price point, so I'm guessing that has something to do with it. And I wonder if foreign exchange. I should probably look at this before I start spouting off, but I would imagine if the yen depreciated a little bit, that might decrease the sales figure a little bit when you adjust it for the dollar impact, but the margin would be intact still. So
Yeah.
that's a thought.
And another interesting call out too, apart from the Tesla gross margin of 19.8%, which is mind blowing, despite the rev miss. Can you imagine? But the other thing is Tesla free cash flow 2.74 versus 1.6 estimate. And free cash flow is everything. That's probably the most important metric, as Jeff Bezos used to say over 20 years ago. So, any thoughts on that? Especially with all the investments that they're making at the same time.
Yeah, they invested 3.5 billion in capex this quarter, and they
Yeah.
were still able to generate that much in cash flow.
How much are the emission credits?
700 something million, I think.
Oh,
139 million. So I mean, higher than it has been historically, but lower sequentially.
Usually it's like 500 million or something in that neighborhood, right, Matt? Most like
Yeah, that's
average.
where it had been for a long time. Last quarter, it spiked up to 890, and so
Mhm.
like, okay, is that an anomaly or is that a sign of things to come? So I am surprised it's as high as it is again, but it's not like it's completely out of whack and driving 100% of the change. It seems like there's a lot of little things that are all kind of piling up for a really strong quarter.
I'm sure Gordon Johnson is delighted with the results.
I mean, their operating expenses are super lean.
Oh, yeah.
They're 2.28 billion after all their restructuring is done now. And I was kind of expecting they'd come somewhere in the $2.5 billion range, maybe a little bit under that. So that they really, all that cost cutting they did is like, that's a meaningful impact there.
Because this
For
is the
sure.
first quarter as well that they had the full impact of the RIF, correct?
Yep, that's right. And they
Yeah,
still
you
do
can
have
see it the lowest in 5 quarters.
Madness chart. It's kind of struggling around the 232 mark and it falls off again. But now it's 229. Now it's all about waiting for the guidance in 10 minutes.
Marines call. I wonder how many say questions they'll get to.
I think they'll get to a bunch because a lot of them they're going to be like, "This is not the place for product announcements."
Yeah. Do you think Elon's going to maybe not be on this call, given how active he is politically right now? Do you think he'll let his?
No, his stump speeches are just an hour or so. I'm sure he's scheduled around it. I think considering how good the results are, I think he'll definitely be on.
just a shout out to the fact that Farzad's not on here to bring the stream down. This is really nice.
Maybe we should have
Yeah.
Farzad not on more often so the
I-
stock reacts this way. You know?
I
Market
know,
likes
right?
no Farzad.
Yeah.
Hans, you can take over, I think.
Yeah. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Cindy.
Can we double tap as well? Was it Matt that you mentioned the Cybertruck is now contributing to margin? I think that
Yes,
is
it is.
worth repeating. I mean, what other car company can make something so groundbreaking, so revolutionary, with such complex technology, materials, and make it profitable in a short window of
Oh,
time? It's unthinkable.
Lucid.
Rivian.
I like imagine being one of the other incumbents. It'd make you pretty anxious right now, I'd say.
I
Oh,
mean,
I would
yeah, I
say so.
can't imagine being GM or Ford and looking at the Cybertruck and realizing that this is what you have to look forward to competing against for the next couple decades.
Yeah, they're 1/3 into the ramp, and they're already profitable. Mind blowing.
It does bear noting though that I mean they're selling at least in Q3 exclusively Foundation Series Cybertrucks. So now that they're introducing the lower cost variation, those margins might shrink, but that's going to be offset by the fact that they're continuing to work out kinks in their production system and scale and get the economies of scale that's going to help. So it's going to be a little bit of a cat and mouse game with ASPs coming down on Cybertruck. You're not going to get this one-time benefit of the recognition of all the Cybertruck revenue for both Q2 and Q3, which is what they got, because all the Cybertrucks sold in Q2, the FSD revenue was recognized in Q3 also. So that's a little bit of a one-time bump, pretty small impact, I think, overall, but it's, there were a couple things that are one-time-ish with Cybertruck in Q3. So I would be curious if they talk at all about like what was the actual gross margin on Cybertruck, or like are they still going to be gross margin positive at these new lower price ASPs that they're going to have going forward.
That's coming. But that's a big move out there. And that means there's some gamma squeezing going on too, because a lot of bears are very much short. And they were used to the last 4 quarters of going down.
Can we just say what a shock these numbers were, though? I mean, like every single, Twitter analyst, expert, myself included, was coming up with EPS figures lower than Wall Street. Tesla absolutely knocked the socks off of every single estimate. I mean, this is like across the board. This is a massive beat.
Matt, if they only had regulatory credits of 300 million instead of 800 million or whatever, if they had 500 million less regulatory credits, how much would that have affected the earnings per share? How many pennies?
It's a handful. I can get you. Let me.
Just like a rough
I
estimate,
closed
like 5 cents, 10 cents.
No, it's not 20 cents. It'd be between 5 and 10, I suspect.
Okay, all right. So it's it's hard.
Irrelevant.
I feel like that provides a lot of noise, and that number alone, for example, like it's almost meaningless for the long. And a lot we like to discount that, but it's real money. But it's a lot of noise in that variation, I feel like.
I don't know, with
mean,
everybody pulling back on their EV plans, I think that regulatory credit revenue stream is only going to continue to grow for the foreseeable future.
Could be
Actually growing pretty significantly year over year. And I think quarter over quarter, they were up like 30% or something like that. They've been gaining market share now in Europe, probably less so. But it's not clear to me that reg credits will be going up based on the success that some of the other OEMs are having.
But to put it in a context, that regulatory credit that everybody always wants to say it's, we need to factor it out. That's over 50,000 H100s a quarter that they can buy. That's over. That's probably closer to almost 100,000 H100s per quarter they could be buying. They're essentially, all the other incumbents are paying for Tesla to get the AI compute hardware so that they can then further take the lead on them. I mean, the irony is palpable.
I mean, there's like, it's not actually nothing, but it's like, what was the actual earnings per share?
I was going to say, you factor that out, it's still a beat.
Exactly. Yeah.
Sorry, Farzad, you're gone.
To circle back though to the capex point, we really were using that money to build out auto manufacturing capacity for a long time, but I think to your point, Nico, like we have shifted to now using that capex really to invest in training capacity and building out the AI factories that will produce the intelligence that animates our robo taxis and our Optimus robot.
Yeah, another very nuanced finding as well. People were all up in arms about them stopping the supercharger rollout, but they created more superchargers last quarter than the previous quarter. So they have not slowed down. In fact, they've accelerated. Just a small little
point.
Roadster, is it going to happen? Quick round the table, yes or no? I think it is. Next year, and will you order one?
I got my reservation in already, so I'm just waiting. Yeah.
Wow, I'd probably kill myself, so I'm not gonna. I'm happy with the Cybertruck. I need something bulletproof.
I think they might only produce a certain amount of them, I guess. I don't know. I feel like it's just gonna be like a spectacle, like a technology spectacle or something, and it'll make like several thousand of them, and that's it. So it could be like a real cool collector's item for the future if that's the case. But maybe they'll just make as many as people want. Who knows?
There was another thing as well that people may have missed, but a lot of people were saying that the conductive charging would be a failure and would result in a lot of loss of energy. But apparently it's running at 95% efficiency. Do you guys see that? That's also a big point.
Yeah, I definitely saw that MKBHD put his foot in his mouth on that one. And obviously, yeah, Wi-Furion is above 90. So it's hard to say. I didn't see the estimate that it was actually at 95%, but I knew it was somewhere in that vicinity.
Yeah,
I think it's between like 90 to
Go ahead.
95%. I'm an investor in this company, Hevo Power, that's been doing it for a long time too. And they're working with some of the OEMs on this for future models. And I think it's between 90 and 95%. Maybe it was 80, 85% 5 years ago or something, but it's gotten a lot better in recent years. It can only be up to a certain capacity. Like if they try to pass through as much energy as a supercharger, even at 93% or something, there's too much heat escaping to make it work because it would melt everything around it. So it can only be up to a certain level of energy capacity power at a time. I can't remember the
kilowatts for the charge rate. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Which
amps or whatever. Yeah.
that does seem questionable to me. Tesla clearly has thought about this before they decided that the Cybercab's just not going to have a charge port. So like they must have figured out how to charge them at a high output supercharger type of situation. I mean, do you guys have any thoughts on like are they going to just update the supercharger infrastructure with some mats or something, or are they just going to assume that people only charge these at home?
I think there's gonna be two things. One, I think you'll have dedicated Cybercab charging lots, and then I think when you buy Cybercab, you'll also get the opportunity to buy a wireless charging station, just like you have the ability to buy a wall
Mhm.
charger.
Yeah.
Did they say the Cybercab is not going to have a plug for superchargers? Did they
Nope,
explicitly say that?
doesn't. Yep, doesn't
Okay.
have it.
They didn't say that.
But it
Hmm.
wasn't.
Visible in the vehicle doesn't mean that it's not there.
No,
Yeah.
they're going to make this minimalist in every single way. When you sit inside it, it's just whatever you could rip out, they ripped out except for the chairs and the screen. That's it.
Well,
That's
I
all
wonder
that's
how
in
much
there.
cost it would reduce to eliminate that charging capability if they, if they wanted to.
I'd say
It might save $500 or
300 to 500 vehicle, I'd say, at scale.
I think that's going to be a game time decision that they're going to continue to explore from now all the way up until they start up production. And
Mm.
I think it's a 50-50 chance you may see production launch with or without the supercharger plugs.
I think if
Mm.
they're doing a global rollout, they would need to have both. But because it's going to be in select places, maybe China, Texas, California, they'll have it in cities that will have the infra built out before they actually launch. And they've got a year to do that. And that's probably one of the reasons why it's going to take a year before we see these things in the wild, the charging infra.
And I think you could, to Nico's point, you can do pretty high capacity charging infrastructure in a parking lot where you just have basically FIFO lanes where there's just a whole line of these wireless chargers that they move over. And so you could fill it up, an entire parking lot to where there's an entry on one side and an exit on the other side. And the entire parking lot is essentially just nothing but these wireless charging pads, and you can move quite a few cyber cabs through something like that and charge a lot of vehicles in a relatively short period of time.
Yeah,
Did
it's
anybody
definitely.
find cheaper?
I was going to say it's definitely cheaper to, I think, build out a bunch of charging pads than to put up a bunch of superchargers.
For sure.
Does anybody here know the exact profit margin of FSD today? Would it be 80%, 90%? Has anybody ever figured that out? I haven't been able to.
In terms of how much they're recognizing,
No, yeah, just if you imagine they recognize 10 million, how much of that is pure profit?
I think almost all of it.
But did they
Yeah.
not have 8-9 years of FSD development into it, or is that all written off already?
Well, that stays in the deferred cost. So I mean, let's say they fully launched FSD everywhere and they delivered all the features. There would still be some amount of deferred FSD revenue just because like they've got to account for updates that they're going to have going forward. So my understanding of any FSD revenues that are recognized, it's essentially like 100% margin, but there's really operating costs that go into that because the whole AI team is like their expenses essentially hit the overhead line, like R&D and probably mostly R&D, I would suspect. So that's like the cost of developing the software that ultimately gets rolled out. So if you sell a car today for $10,000, I think Tesla's probably recognizing around, I don't know why I said $10,000, $8,000 for FSD. I suspect Tesla's recognizing around 70% ish of that revenue today based on how much they've delivered of the functionality. And maybe if they fully deliver every little piece that they've promised, they might recognize an extra, I don't know, 10% or something like that. And then the balance will just get recognized over time over the expected life of the vehicle.
And Mark Newton from Fundstrat was very bullish too. He believed, if I'm not mistaken, this will be the last dip before the big rager to a new all-time high. Did anybody see that? Yeah. He's super bullish. And he estimates new all-time high within the next 6. So
I've got a buddy of mine texting me. Is this all-time high for Tesla as far as cash on hand?
I think so, yeah.
Yes. Yep. But it's always all-time high basically because they're always having positive free cash flow.
That's crazy though, right? Like going through all the competition, just inflation period, all the discount. I mean, it's insane.
But especially scaling multiple gigafactories simultaneously if you include Megafactory and the semi-Gigafactory and also the battery facilities and the extensions to Giga Texas and so much more. It's pretty mind-blowing that they're still socking away so much free cash flow. Apparently, by the way, I just saw some breaking news that CNBS is fudding Tesla again. I don't have TV, so I can't pick that up. They probably have Gordon Johnson on.
Oh boy.
General Motors is coming. They're going to take over.
I would actually love to hear Gordon explain why this Q3 result is a disaster for Tesla. I'm sure he'd find some way, but like if I tried, it would be such a struggle.
His next line will be, "They're cooking the books. This isn't possible."
Oh yeah. Oh, fraud. Yeah, fraud's always the answer when you're
Yeah.
positive free cash flow.
And busted growth.
Oh yeah. Well, look, their revenue was actually flat, so like clearly the only way they can get around with this is with fraud.
It's easier to kind of, I guess, grow profits when revenue's growing. It's harder when it's not, which is another angle, logically, sometimes.
I'm excited to see how quickly this Chinese Megapack factory gets up and running. They said they're going to
Yep.
start delivering. I mean, we saw what they did with the car factory. China knows how to produce and manufacture, and Tom Zhu there back in charge.
I didn't realize his background until about a month ago was factory building. That's his
Yeah.
skill, not
Yep.
cars or whatever. It was just building factories that build factories, and he's brilliant at it. When is that Shanghai Mega Factory done? January?
I think it's supposed to start producing. I don't know when it's going to roll out. I saw something where it says, I think it mentions they're going to start rolling out the first products from it in Q1.
Yeah, I'm curious, Matt, what your take on. I mean, we're looking at 7 gigawatt hours deployed in this quarter. I know that's off a little bit from what we saw deployed in Q2, but it seems like another really strong quarter for deployments. Is that in line with, ahead of, or behind what your expectations would have been for the
Yeah, yeah,
quarter?
pretty much in line. So let me see what I actually put in my model here because I can never keep all this straight. So in my model, I estimated 6.9 gigawatt hours. I wasn't doing that just for the memes. I did think, I mean, with the way that these ramp, so it seems to me that Lathrop has been ramping. If they were at full capacity, that'd be 10 gigawatt hours per quarter that we'd see. But there's also a little bit of power wall in there, so it gets a little bit messy. But with them being flat for so many quarters in a row, it just seemed very logical that they had built up a lot of mega packs, and just an unusually large number of them essentially took delivery and got qualified as a deployment in Q2. So it wasn't necessarily indicative of like some massive step change that we would never kind of come back down from. So I was expecting a pullback, and the pullback was not as sharp as I had actually projected. So this is pretty good news, I think, that the deployments are still so strong. And especially when you couple that with the guidance that they had, essentially showing that they'll get to 9 gigawatt hours plus in Q4. The whole energy, I couldn't have asked for a better quarter on deployments, on margins, on outlook for energy. I mean, the absolute home run quarter for energy.
Yeah. And just digging into one of their claims as well, they said they would make a new record number that of growth for 2024. I went back to Q4 2023 and they made 495,000 cars. So to break the record for 2024, they just need to do 20,000 more than they did a year ago. And Cybertruck didn't exist. Cybertruck alone will close that gap. So that's very achievable. What do you guys think?
My question
Yeah, I
always on
think.
demand. Go ahead, Hans.
Well, I think that.
They can pull the demand levers any way they want, so they can fill demand anyhow, I think.
Yeah, it seems like they're definitely, leaning all in on that right now with all the 0% financing here in the US, the $4,000 inventory discounts. I think they're really, pushing the pedal to the metal on trying to move as many cars as possible this quarter. And I think Q4 will be a strong quarter. I think that the, strength that we're seeing in China between that and I think kind of rebounding in the consumer here in the United States, that the demand will be, I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility that they'll be able to meet that as long as they can, don't hit any hiccups from a production standpoint and we can actually deliver all the way across the board.
So
Which
I got
production's been solid. Like I don't expect anything there.
I have a philosophical question for you all. So the competition is reeling. first of all. Second of all, there's been a big uptick in the second half this year back into BEVs. So BEVs are not dead. Third of all, would you buy a dumb car if you were going to make that capital investment today, or would you buy a smart car that can drive itself? Because if I was investing, I would not dream in a million years of buying a dumb car. It would only be an FSD Tesla.